for bearing with us for a few minutes. We had some problems with the internet, and we're live streaming this event for people who aren't able to be here in person. So we just wanted to make sure that the folks tuning into the live stream will be able to hear everything before we got started. And just before we get started, just very briefly for people who are here in person, we have a little bit of a cord spaghetti situation right here, and the bathrooms are right back in this corner. So if you need to use the bathroom, we tried to create kind of a clear walkway down this wall, and you should be able to avoid the cords. But if you do have to pass through here at any point, just be cautious. My name is Kaylin Nicholson. I'll be the MC for our meeting today. I was part of the Tax Amazon movement and many other struggles for renters' rights in Seattle with Kshama's city council office. And now I'm an organizer with Workers Strike Back and helping to build Kshama's independent revolutionary socialist campaign for Congress. An absolutely fundamental difference between Kshama as a working class leader and the so-called progressive Democrats is that we're using this campaign as an organizing tool to build movement. The Democratic Party is already telling people that the only way to stop ICE's campaign of terror or end the war on Iran is to get more Democrats elected in the midterms. And not only does this ignore the reality that the Democratic Party has been just as complicit as the Republicans in the creation and ongoing funding of the war and deportation machines that Trump is making use of today, but it also erases the role of working people getting organized and taking action ourselves to win our demands. In reality, this is the only way that real progress has been made throughout the history of this country, not by voting for big business-backed political parties. So that's why Kshama and Workers Strike Back believe that any campaign claiming to represent the interests of working people needs to be actively building the struggles that are needed to win our demands. And that's what we're doing here today, talking about how we can build for a general strike to shut down ICE and the inhumane detention centers in our communities and all across the country. General strikes will also be necessary to end the rapidly escalating war in the Middle East, which is just the latest move in the broader imperialist project actively carried out by both parties to defend the interests of the US billionaire class. Today is also International Women's Day. And our first speaker today will be Joan Wright, who is a tech worker and a member of the Kickstarter United OPEIU Union Local 153, as well as a member of Workers Strike Back and Revolutionary Workers. And Joan is going to share a few thoughts on why this day matters to all working people, regardless of gender, and how it relates to our discussion on building for a general strike to shut down ICE. So please join me in welcoming Joan.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kaylin. As Kaylin said, my name is Joan Wright. I'm a union tech worker with Kickstarter United and a member of OPIU 153. And I'm really proud, incredibly proud to be here on International Women's Day, fighting alongside Kshama's campaign for US Congress and fighting to shut down ICE. Earlier today, myself and Natalie, we were up in Seattle at the Seattle Women's March. We were out campaigning for Kshama. I don't know if you can all see my boots are covered in mud because it was absolutely miserable weather-wise, but that's what it's going to take to win this campaign. That's the kind of organizing that it's going to take to fight to shut down ICE. But it's also going to take political clarity, right? Because we know that the organizations behind, sort of these NGO-led Women's Day marches want to defang these movements, right? They just want people, exactly as Kaylin said, to just vote blue in the midterms. That is their goal. That is their idea of how we're going to fight things and change things. And that is not what is going to work. And that is also not how and not why International Women's Day was founded and what it was for. International Women's Day was born over a century ago in 1908 when 15,000 women who were garment workers, working class women, marched through the streets in New York City, and they were demanding shorter hours, better pay, and the right to vote. It was born International Women's Day. It was born out of the labor movement and out of working class women refusing to accept the exploitation, that this exploitation was just the natural order of things. And it was born out of socialists who consciously knew that the oppressive and rotten system of capitalism could and must come to an end, and that a socialist world is possible. And that history, why International Women's Day was created, is so urgent right now. The women facing the brunt of Trump's agenda and the right-wing agenda are the tens of millions of working class and poor women. And among them are immigrant women workers. When ICE terrorizes a community like they are all across this country and also in this community, as people are speaking out, they're getting more active in Seattle and in this community. When these agents storm a workplace, when families are separated, and when people are disappeared into detention, it is working class women and their families who bear the brunt of it. Immigrant women and men and tens of millions of other American workers are the ones working 2 to 3 jobs in industries like agriculture, meatpacking, and domestic work, doing some of the hardest, most essential labor in the country while being denied even basic protections. The attack on immigrant workers that is happening right now is an attack on all of us, and we cannot let it divide our movement. This attack serves the interests of capitalism and the billionaires and the multimillionaires who profit from the system to divide the billions of us whose labor makes the system run from one day to the next. The bosses make profits and have their stability and their comfort in their institutions when billions of us are docile and we don't get organized and fight back. And they do this actively, right? They try to keep us disorganized and they keep us from fighting back. They divide us. They divide American-born against immigrant, women against men, straight against gay, black against white. And the truth is that we, workers everywhere, have far, far more in common across nationality, across gender. We have far more in common than one another than we do with any of the capitalist bosses of any nation, anywhere. And we must be crystal clear. We need to be crystal clear about this, however, that this is not just an aberration that began or will end with Trump. The Democratic Party itself has been completely complicit on the attacks on immigrants for decades. This is the whole system, the attacks on immigrants and the whole system itself. It is a bipartisan machine, and the Democratic Party's failure to fight the attacks on immigrants is not a weakness, right? It is actually a reflection of whose interests they serve. Kshama's opponent, Adam Smith, do you know what he did? He voted to create ICE. And since then, he has voted to fund it over and over again for decades. That is not an aberration of the Democratic Party. That is the embodiment of the Democratic Party itself. And that is why we need to abandon the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party has proven itself to be an instrument of big business and not working people. What we need is a party of working people, one that represents our interests and will go on the offensive to actually fight for them. Last month, 15,000 nurses in New York City ended a 41-day strike, the longest nurses strike in the city's history. They won raises, preserved healthcare, and secured new protections against AI, replacing their clinical judgment in the workplace. And the most important moment of that strike was when rank and file nurses voted down a rotten tentative agreement that their own leadership had endorsed. And they voted it down 3-1 because it did not deliver the safe staffing ratios that they went on strike for. They fought, then they continued to fight against their leadership's recommendation because they knew that they needed to fight for it. And they did that. They fought and they won that better deal. And that is the fight that we need. That is class struggle unionism. That is what it looks like when workers do not wait for permission from the top to ask for what we need. That is what International Women's Day was founded on. And my union at Kickstarter, last year, we went on strike for something that does not get talked about in labor negotiations. It gets, maybe a silent nod, but it never actually gets fought for. We fought for a 32-hour work week. And we did not entirely win it in our contract, but we won important gains for our working hours. And we're going to keep fighting for a 32-hour work week, solidly fought concretely in a contract. Because here is the thing, the 40-hour work week that has been in place, it was never designed with women in mind. It was designed for a world where women stayed at home and where someone else, a wife, a mother, someone was doing all of the unpaid labor at home, childcare, cooking, elder care, all of it pushed into the background, all of it made invisible and uncompensated. A shorter work week isn't just about giving workers more time, which we desperately need. We need to be absolutely clear about that. We absolutely need more time to live our lives. But fundamentally, the 40-hour work week was meant to exploit women. It is, and a fight for a 32-hour work week is the beginning of the equalization of the burden of domestic labor that has always disproportionately exploited women. Shorter hours, living wages, free healthcare, and free childcare. These are women's issues. These are not just women's issues, right? These are workers' issues. They are issues that matter to everyone. And they're the demands that could bring millions of working class women, of fighters into the labor movement and create a titanic force that could topple the bosses. But to do that, right, we need leadership. To win those kind of battles, we need clear leadership that is not beholden to corporate donors, that knows who our class enemies are, right? We need a general strike. We need to shut down ICE. And we need Kshama Sawant in Congress. If we can elect Kshama to Congress, which we have a real chance to do, it will be one of the biggest breakthroughs in America in decades for the entire movement, for the labor movement, for the women's movement, to make breakthroughs that have not been seen in decades, right? And it is a breakthrough that has the opportunity to build a new party for the working class and to build a revolutionary socialist movement. It is an opportunity for women, for Black people, for the LGBTQ community, for immigrants, for the billions of us workers fighting to overthrow capitalism and winning a socialist world. That is the only way that we can have a world that is free from oppression. So on this International Women's Day, I urge all of my fellow workers here in this room, here on the live stream, I urge all of my fellow workers, regardless of your gender, to dedicate ourselves to fight, to dedicating ourselves to fight to elect Kshama to Congress as the first revolutionary socialist ever in the United States Congress, because that is what we need. Solidarity.
When women's rights are under attack, what do we do? When immigrant rights are under attack, what do we do? When workers' rights are under attack, what do we do? Hell yes. Thank you, everyone. Our main speaker today is a revolutionary socialist who has gone to war for working people for over a decade in Seattle and nationally. She used her Seattle City Council office to launch and lead movements to win the nation's highest minimum wage. She defeated billionaires like Jeff Bezos to win the Amazon tax, which raised hundreds of millions of dollars every year for affordable housing. She also won an increase to the Amazon tax to ensure publicly funded free abortions for any woman who needs it in Seattle. She won so many historic renters' rights laws that I can't go through the list, but we have a pamphlet on one of the tables back there that talks more about Kshama's record in the city council, and I encourage everyone to check it out. As a city council member, Kshama took home only the average worker's wage, donating the rest of her six-figure council member salary to labor union strike funds and movements of workers against oppression. And she's now running as an independent for US Congress. If elected, she would become the first ever revolutionary socialist in Congress. Electing Kshama to Congress will be, as Joan said, a breakthrough, the kind that we desperately need for the working class in this country and around the world. Kshama is also a member of the elected National Coordinating Committee of Workers Strike Back, which is an organization working here in Seattle and all over the country to help working people organize and struggle in their workplaces, in their schools, and in the streets. So with that, welcome, Kshama.
Good afternoon, everyone who's here in person and watching over live stream. Trump's ICE is terrorizing American cities. Thousands of people are being snatched off the streets and from parking lots and offices, and drivers are being pulled over by masked and warrantless ICE agents traveling in unmarked cars. Immigrant community members and peaceful activists, I'm sorry, I'm just not feeling well. Immigrant community members and peaceful activists have been brutally murdered in broad daylight by ICE agents. Working people overwhelmingly oppose Trump's right-wing agenda in poll after poll. We as working people and rank-and-file union members urgently need to build independent movements. We need to independently organize mass protests and strike actions. We need to do all of this nationally to shut down the economy and defeat Trump, the right wing, and the billionaire class. For us to succeed, we need the correct kind of leadership, not one that is continually bending to pressures from the political establishment, but that is instead prepared. That is instead prepared to relentlessly build militant movements as we did over the decade of my socialist city council office in Seattle. This is something that is unfortunately being provided only by Workers Strike Back at the moment. And our congressional campaign is the only concrete campaign workers have nationally as a vehicle to build a fight back, and we need to make the most of it. The Democratic Party controls the levers of government in large swaths of the nation. Democrats control the governor's office and majorities in both houses of the state legislature in 16 states. Democrats also control the mayor's office in 67 of the 100 largest cities. Many of the very same cities that have experienced some of the most shocking ICE attacks. These Democrats throw up their hands. They say how Trump is bad, but in fact, there is a great deal they could do immediately to fight back against these vicious attacks by Trump's ICE. They could roll back the massive surveillance networks in big cities. They could ban all local agencies from sharing any data with ICE and enforce the law with serious penalties like firing agency heads. They could enact citywide eviction moratoriums to protect families targeted by ICE. These are demands that Workers Strike Back has put forward. Workers Strike Back members have organized City Hall speakouts in multiple cities. In fact, tomorrow morning, we're doing this in New York City. Most paramount, both local Democrats and those in Congress could have been using their prominent public platforms, which can reach millions of working people, to launch mass protests and civil disobedience. But the Democrats have done none of this. This is no accident. It is because the Democratic Party is not progressive. It is a party of the billionaires. And the truth is that the Democratic Party has done very little to stand up to Trump. In fact, several states that have a government led by a Democratic Party, such as New York, Massachusetts, and California, also have very high numbers of ICE arrests. This is directly linked with how much the Democratic Party officials controlling the city, county, and state police, licensing, and other departments are cooperating with and sharing data with ICE. The Democratic Party controls Washington State, where we're speaking from. Chillingly, according to the University of Washington Center for Human Rights, Washington State's Democratic-controlled government agencies allowed Trump's federal agencies, such as ICE and the Department of Homeland Security, to query the state's Department of Licensing database nearly 2.7 million times in 2025 alone. It is not surprising then that 2,000 immigrant community members, including children and elderly people, were arrested by ICE in Washington State in last year, just last year alone. Democrats on city councils have gone out of their way to help construct the ominous surveillance infrastructure making Trump's ICE terror possible. In Seattle, the all-Democrat city council massively expanded CCTV, closed-circuit television surveillance camera coverage throughout the city last year. They also added automated license plate readers, ALPR, to all of the city's police department patrol cars. The ALPR can scan thousands of plates within an hour and log a vehicle's license plate number, location, and timestamp into a database. This is all highly useful for Trump and ICE. In New York City, Democratic mayor and Democratic Socialists of America leader Zohran Mamdani recently announced a budget that includes a shocking $94 million to maintain the New York City Police Department's domain awareness system. This is an enormous Microsoft-based surveillance network that blankets all the 5 boroughs of the city so tightly that it is called the Ring of Steel. The network integrates CCTV cameras, license plate readers, and facial recognition technology, transmitting data directly to NYPD officers' phones. All of this is chilling, is ominous enough, is dangerous enough in normal times, but these are even worse than normal times because this data is being shared with ICE in order to grab people off the streets. So Trump's ramping up of deportations is horrendous and extremely dangerous, but it is not him alone. Defeating his agenda means fighting against both the Democratic and Republican parties, both of which represent the billionaire class. I mentioned earlier that 2,000 people were arrested by ICE under Trump last year in Washington State. Well, the ICE machine wasn't asleep under Biden. Under Biden, the year before that, in 2024, ICE arrested 800 people in Washington State. So it is a continuum of attacks across Republican and Democratic presidential administrations. Before this current escalation by Trump, Democratic President Barack Obama became known as the deporter-in-chief, having deported more than 3 million immigrants in his 8 years as president, compared to 2 million during the 8 years of Republican George W. Bush as president. Trump still has a ways to go to catch up to Obama. Billionaires and multimillionaires, including with companies like Palantir, have been making huge profits from the lucrative contracts with ICE under both Democratic and Republican administrations. Contrary to the popular idea, the Democratic Party is not a lesser evil. The Democratic and Republican parties are the 2 most powerful parties of global capitalism, and they are responsible for brutal attacks on immigrants and all working people, multiple genocides, war after imperialist war, and the plundering of the resources around the world, which itself drives immigration. Horrific attacks on immigrants are endemic to this system, not only in the United States, but globally. My opponent, Democrat Adam Smith, has been fully on board for a long time with this anti-immigrant and anti-worker agenda. He voted to create ICE. This was in 2002 when he voted yes on Republican President George W. Bush's Homeland Security Act. But Adam Smith was far from the lone Democrat who did that. He was one of 87 Democrats in the House who voted for it, and in the Senate, 44 Democrats, including Washington State Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, voted for it. Smith has voted to send over tens of billions of dollars for the Israeli genocide of Gaza. He has voted repeatedly to block United Nations food aid to Gaza. Smith has called anti-genocide protesters, you and I, he has called us left-wing fascists and demanded that we be arrested. Many Democrats, including Adam Smith, are being bankrolled by billionaires like Alex Karp and Joe Lonsdale of Palantir. Adam Smith is the #1 recipient of weapons industry money among congressional Democrats. Now, he's suddenly claiming he opposes Trump's war on Iran. You know, he sent an email this past week claiming, I do not support this war. Bullshit. Adam Smith literally funded Trump's war on Iran back in December of last year. Smith was one of the 115 House Democrats, along with 27 Senate Democrats, who voted in December for a $900.6 billion in new war spending. This is one of the highest ever military spending bills in US history, and it was nothing other than a blank check for Trump's wars. With that vote, the Democratic and Republican parties both, including warmongers like Adam Smith, gave Trump nearly $1 trillion for spending on wars like this brutal war on Iran. In fact, in that vote, Smith and his fellow Democrats gave Trump $8 billion more than even what Trump asked for. So why is Adam Smith pretending he's against Trump's war on Iran? Because he's afraid of our anti-war socialist campaign. That's why. He's afraid of the 4,000 working people nationally who have already donated to our campaign and the hundreds who have already started volunteering. He and the Democratic Party are afraid of our track record of using a single elected office and winning historic working class victories. Understanding the role of the Democratic Party as a party of capitalism means understanding the role of the so-called progressive Democrats. This includes so-called progressive Democrats like Pramila Jayapal and AOC. First of all, progressive Democrats have failed to win any substantial victories for the working class. More and more self-described progressives and socialists have gotten elected in the Democratic Party since I won my first Seattle City Council election in 2013. This includes the so-called squad in the US House and the over 250 Democratic Socialists of America candidates elected into the Democratic Party. And yet, despite that, they have won nothing of substance. No universal health care, no taxes on Wall Street, no rent control, no cancellation of student debt, no end to military aid to Israel, no end to the genocide in Gaza. They have not done so much as raise the national minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is still an absolutely disgraceful $7.25 an hour. Compare that to the track record of my fellow revolutionary socialists and my Seattle City Council office. Within the first 6 months of taking office, we won the nation's highest minimum wage by building a militant movement and forcing Democratic politicians and big business to concede. Seattle's minimum wage has gone up from $9.19 an hour in January 2015 to $21.30 an hour in January of this year. That is an increase of over 131%. And across the nation, tens of millions of workers have won historic wage increases over the last decade because of our victory in Seattle. These are unheard of victories. What progressive Democrats do is offer lip service, and even that only when they feel forced to do so. Alongside that lip service, they occasionally bring progressive bills that they then make sure go down a black hole and never actually even get voted on, let alone win. Like the endless bills on Medicare for All, which are never voted on and are really just photo ops for Pramila Jayapal and her fellow progressives. Progressive Democrats play a truly insidious role. They perform the task of whitewashing the crimes of their billionaire-owned party and its role in war, genocide, deportations, and relentless attacks on the living standards of working and poor people. The role of the progressive Democrats is to endlessly string working people along with the idea that the Democratic Party can be reformed. That is what they do. And they give cover to the worst people in their party. For the second time in 3 years, Pramila Jayapal recently, late last year, introduced a so-called Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act. If passed, it would end the use of private detention facilities and stop the inhumane and unjust treatment of immigrants. Of course, we would support such a bill if it came to a vote. But the whole point of Pramila Jayapal is that this bill is never going to be brought to a vote. That is exactly why she has twice now introduced this bill with Adam Smith. And in fact, when she first brought it in 2023, she brought it alongside both Adam Smith and Cory Booker. Both of them are vicious, warmongering Democrats who have supported ICE. It is a blatant attempt to whitewash the horrible record of people like Adam Smith in relation to ICE and in relation to war. For years since his first vote, Adam Smith has supported ever-increasing funds for ICE and the detention centers. And the other example is what Zoran Mamdani has done. He endorsed Hakeem Jeffries without any conditions. Hakeem Jeffries is another genocidal Democrat. And Mamdani is somebody who ran on a record of standing with the Palestinian people and standing against the genocide. He has also endorsed New York Governor Democrat Kathy Hochul, who acted as a strike breaker against the nurses' strike. So Mamdani went and marched on the picket line with the nurses, and he says he supports the nurses, but he is also the person, the most high-profile endorser of Kathy Hochul, who passed an executive order and kept renewing that executive order to make it easy for the hospital bosses to hire scabs to try and undermine and break the nurses' strike. And ultimately, these hospital bosses, they spent upwards of $100 million hiring those scabs. Jayapal and AOC also broke the railroad workers' strike. So let's be crystal clear. You can't call yourself a progressive, let alone socialist, if you are either yourself a strike breaker or you're supporting strike breakers. The function of progressives like Pramila Jayapal, AOC, and Zoran Mamdani is to make working people feel a little less angry at the Democrats and make them cling to the hope that the Democrats will finally, maybe someday, one day, do something, anything good for working people. This is the classic role of a gatekeeper. Working people's movements will not win unless we call this out, unless we begin building independent militant movements. And why do we describe them as gatekeepers? Because on the surface, all of these progressives, they appear like they should be on our side. But in reality, their role, as we have seen, is to put the brakes on any fight back by working people. Yeah. Being clear about the role of gatekeepers is a make or break for movements. Winning anything for the working class requires defeating the gatekeepers. And when movement leaders are not clear about this, movements reach a dead end. Among the most insidious gatekeepers that working people need to overcome are the vast majority of the current labor leadership. Instead of leading working people to fight back, they subscribe to what we call business unionism, which is basing itself instead on making peace with the bosses and the parties of the bosses. That is why they oppose strike action or any kind of militant fight back, and they are tied at the hip to the Democratic Party. Immigrants make up about 15% of the American population and of American union membership. The nation's second largest union, the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU, was founded by immigrant janitors. It has an even greater share of immigrant members at 25%. Bosses grossly underpay immigrant workers as a mechanism to keep down the wages of all workers. Fighting for immigrant rights is in the interest of all American workers. Despite this, most of the labor leadership has done nothing to fight back against the vicious attacks on immigrants by Trump and the Republicans or by the Democratic Party over the years. Not a single major labor leader has begun organizing for strike action. Such a response last year could have stopped Trump's deportation machine in its tracks. Democratic politicians and the existing union leadership prefer to direct mass anger into what they think are safe channels, like the No Kings rallies. There's another one scheduled for March 28th, and we will be there. Workers Strike Back and our campaign will be there talking to the thousands of working people who come. But it will be more of the same from the Democratic and labor leadership at the protest. They don't want militant movements. And in Seattle, the No Kings organizers have refused to let me speak, just as they did in the first No Kings rally when they didn't let me speak, because they don't want any voices. They don't want any voices who will advocate for class struggle and call out the Democratic Party misleaders. The only message of No Kings will be vote blue in the midterms. These No Kings rallies have brought out millions of people and have had huge potential. But union leaders and the Democratic Party have smothered that potential by pointing people back into the Democratic Party and towards completely impotent next steps like call your representatives. The next time a Democrat tells you to call your representative, tell them, fuck off, we need a strike action. Without a class struggle approach of escalating protests, civil disobedience, and strike action, calling our representatives will do nothing but demoralize working people and waste our time. And without these actions, mass protests like No Kings serve as a release valve for the bubbling anger against ICE terror, against imperialist war, and the capitalist system itself. The Democratic Party will never call for the kind of fight back that's needed because they also represent the interests of the capitalist system like the Republicans do. That is why Workers Strike Back and our campaign is calling for a new party for the working class. The capitalist class exploits and plunders vast resources, impoverishing indigenous communities and creating refugees and immigrants. Once the immigrants arrive in the economically more advanced nation, it is in the interest of the capitalists to oppress immigrants in order to maximize exploitation and keep the working class in that nation divided. By keeping immigrant workers marginalized, paid lower tier wages, and always fearful of deportation, the bosses in every nation can set the bar for wages and working conditions lower for all workers. They pit, as Jones said, native-born workers against immigrant workers in a continual race to the bottom. That is why we need international working class solidarity against the anti-immigrant agenda, because it is not in the interest of any worker anywhere. It is only in the interest of the bosses to exploit immigrants. In the United States, we urgently need mass protests, peaceful disobedience, and strike actions. When Trump introduced his abhorrent Muslim travel ban in January 2017 during his first term, he was forced to retract it after tens of thousands of working people shut down several major international airports in a historic civil disobedience strike actions. And one of those airports was Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and it was my socialist city council office at the time that led the SeaTac airport shutdown, disregarding the objections of many Democratic politicians and operatives who were opposed to our mass civil disobedience. We need to bring that type of militancy back on a large scale in order to defeat Trump and both parties. A general strike in Minneapolis, for example, joined by protests and strikes nationwide, would have posed a threat to Trump and the billionaires. Such actions could then be used to go on the offensive to win historic victories like free healthcare for all by taxing the rich, national rent control, a $25 an hour minimum wage, and a permanent end to all US military aid to Israel. Mass movements to win these popular demands will unite working people against the billionaires and their rotten system. But not a single candidate other than our campaign in these midterms are calling for a general strike. Our campaign is fighting against the war on Iran, for a permanent end to all US military aid to Israel, and we are fighting to put a stop to the hundreds of billions of dollars being spent by the Democrats and Republicans to fund wars around the world. We have a real shot to win, and if we do, it will be nothing short of a political earthquake. With one elected office, we won unheard of victories in Seattle, and we defeated the billionaires. I have pledged that if I am elected, I will turn my congressional inauguration into a mass rally of 10,000 people, and we will immediately use my office to launch nationwide movements to win these victories. Happy International Women's Day solidarity.
So before we move on to some time for open discussion, to hear from everyone who's here today and take questions, we're going to have a speaker talk to us about getting the money that we need to build the kind of independent working class fight back that can actually win against the billionaire-backed Democratic and Republican parties. Matthew joined Workers Strike Back a couple of years ago in Kansas City and recently quit his job there to move to Seattle to work full-time on Kshama's Revolutionary Socialist campaign for Congress. So please join me in welcoming Matthew.
Thank you, Kaylin. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to Kshama for your amazing speech. Hello, as Kaylin said, my name is Matthew. Anyway, let's start that again. My name is Matthew Malloy. I am a full-time organizer with the campaign, and I'm thrilled to be with you, all of you today. As we've said many times, we're here to elect Kshama Sawant as the first ever revolutionary socialist to U.S. Congress. As many of you know, it will take resources to win this campaign. We are going up against Palantir, AIPAC, and both parties of the billionaire class. So today, I'm going to ask all of you to donate to help build this campaign. Kshama has never taken a dime in corporate cash, and this time around is no different. Everyone in here, every single one of us, is going up against the billionaires and their money, but we can win. We have done this before. So during Kshama's decade on the Seattle City Council, she did something that tragically for the working class is totally unique in our times. I've never heard of anyone else doing what she has done. Rather than build a career for herself by refusing to challenge the billionaires in the Democratic Party who represent them, Kshama used her office to go to war. She did this by launching movements that defeated the bosses to win the victories like the nation's highest minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and loads of renters' rights. And Kshama has also fought Trump's attacks on immigrants since day one. In 2017, as she talked about, she helped lead mass nonviolent civil disobedience that completely shut down an international airport, SeaTac. They demanded the release of those detained by Trump's racist Muslim ban as part of the movement which pressured the courts to declare the ban unconstitutional. That same year, Kshama led a direct action to block the ICE office in downtown Seattle, organized a rally as part of the hashtag Free Daniel movement in response to the first DACA recipient who was detained under Trump, and supported the hunger strikes 2 years ago at the Northwest Detention Center against the inhumane conditions for undocumented immigrants at the prison. This is exactly the kind of leadership we need right now that is missing in all of working class movements. And this is what made Kshama and Seattle's working people such a threat to big business and the Democratic Party. They continued to win, and so the establishment viciously attacked her and tried to remove her from office again and again. But again and again, they failed, despite big business spending millions of dollars trying to remove her. In this campaign today, we're up against millions of dollars from the weapons manufacturers, health insurance companies, and Trump-supporting billionaires who are backing Kshama's opponent, Democrat Adam Smith. Can I get a boo? Thank you. One of those people is Joe Lonsdale. Lonsdale is a billionaire co-founder of the dystopian surveillance company Palantir. Many of you are familiar with it. He has pushed legislation to criminalize and terrorize homeless people and has donated $1 million to Donald Trump's super PAC. Recently, he advocated for bringing back public hangings. One more boo. Yes, thank you. Lonsdale has donated $1,000 to Adam Smith's campaign, and he's likely to donate even more than that. These are the kinds of people we're up against, but we want to start today with canceling out his donation. The maximum amount of money an individual can give during this primary election is $3,500. Has anyone in this room already donated $1,000 or more to the campaign? Okay, let's go. If you want to give $1,000, but that sounds like a crazy amount of money, you can space that out monthly. A recurring donation of $500 for the next 5 months would get you to $1,000. Can anyone in this room donate $1,000 or more today, right now? Raise your hands. Anyone? I know. It's Joan? Okay. Give it a round for Joan. Woo! Let's talk a little bit more about Adam Smith, Kshama's opponent. He's been in office for nearly 30 years, longer than I have been alive, and has a lifetime of sellouts and betrayals to show for it. As stated, he's voted for the war in Iraq and countless wars in the Middle East. He voted to create ICE and has voted to fund it now for over 20 years. One of Smith's first acts in Congress was to cut $150 billion from Medicare and Medicaid. He voted to break the railroad worker strike in 2022. He's voted for tens of billions of dollars from the genocide in Gaza, and that continues to take place to this very day. And if all that wasn't bad enough, he has voted repeatedly to defund United Nations food aid to Gaza. This man is a war criminal. He has the blood of millions of people on his hands. For this, he has been rewarded by the profiteers in the Zionist lobby. Among Democrats in the House, Adam Smith is the #1 recipient of war industry donations. The pro-Israel lobby group AIPAC was his biggest donor in the last election. But it's not just Adam Smith. It's the Democratic Party as a whole. Not a single Democrat, not even the supposedly progressive ones, are fighting against Trump's attacks on Venezuela or taking a clear anti-war position with Iran. They're mostly just talking performatively about the fact that they weren't able to vote for that war. This is really just a way to talk out of both of their mouths while supporting war after war. It's no accident that Smith and many other Democrats voted for over $900 billion in war spending in December, giving Trump a massive blank check, as Kshama said. If Kshama is elected, it will be an absolute game changer because there is no one in Congress who is standing up for working people against both parties of Wall Street, war, and imperialism. Kshama's election will represent an unprecedented breakthrough for the anti-war movement. She will use her office to build mass movements and pose a serious threat to the warmongering Democrats and Republicans. Working people everywhere have a stake in this election, and that's why working people everywhere have been getting involved. Can anyone here give $500 today, either all at once or by starting a donation of $100 a month over the next 5 months? Woo! So as talked about, when Kshama first ran her city council campaign in 2013, she campaigned on a number of working class demands, including raising the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour. At the time, the Democratic Party politicians and the media called this utopian, yet within 6 months after she took office, Seattle's working people in her office won it. The wage, as Kshama said, has changed from $9.19 an hour in 2015 to $21.30 an hour in 2026. That's an increase over 131%. In a nation the size of a continent, we won the nation's highest minimum wage. Not a small feat, y'all. We need Kshama in Congress because she is a relentless and incredibly effective fighter. We need fighters who are willing to go up against the establishment and fight unambiguously for working people. Right now, Kshama is using her campaign to build momentum for a $25 an hour federal minimum wage, which should be at least $30 an hour in major US cities. And of course, like we're talking about today, Kshama is fighting to stop all deportations, shut down ICE. She has pledged that she will turn her inauguration into a rally of 10,000 working people to launch concrete fights for all of these demands. Can anyone here today give $250 to this campaign? Anyone? Woo! I remember that can be broken down into $50 a month over the next 5 months as well. So, anyone else? Okay. One of my favorite things to talk about in terms of Kshama's record is that she only took the average worker's wage home for 10 years. After taxes, she took home between $40,000 and $50,000 a year and donated the rest of her lavish six-figure salary to strike funds and social movements. Fun fact, Seattle's city council has the nation's highest salaries. So, second highest, okay. This is completely unique. There is no other elected representative who does this. This is the precedent we need to build off of. Kshama has pledged to do absolutely this again if she's elected to Congress. Who here can donate $100 today to help build this campaign? Anyone? Raise your hands. Okay. $20 a month for the next 5 months? Anyone? Let's go. Beautiful. So I know most of us probably just paid rent recently, and I've named some big amounts, but the vast majority of our campaign donations are smaller. The median donation to this campaign is $25. Through thousands of working class donations, Kshama's past campaigns broke all fundraising records in Seattle without taking a dime in corporate cash. The Kshama Solidarity Campaign, which we defeated the right-wing recall attempt to remove her from office, raised over $1 million. We'll have to do that again several times over to defeat Adam Smith, and because of the sacrifice of working people, our campaign has already raised over $450,000. So I have one final ask for anyone who hasn't donated yet. Who here can donate $50, $25, $15, or any amount today to help fund this anti-genocide pro-worker campaign? All amounts are really helpful. It shows we have thousands of supporters regardless of how much you've donated. And these are real sacrifices that everybody is making today, and this is what is going to take. With the working class dollars we raise today and that you pledge over the next few months, and with the thousands of working class volunteer hours we need to get involved over the coming months, we are going to go face to face with the billionaires and their two parties. We are going to build our independent socialist movement to defeat Adam Smith and elect Kshama Sawant to US Congress, everybody. Thank you so much. Solidarity.
Thank you, Matthew. And thank you so much to everyone who donated. Yeah. As Matthew said, you know, our average donation amount is an order of magnitude lower than Adam Smith's, but we also know that each one of those donations represents a order of magnitude more sacrifice than the billionaires that are just pouring their bank accounts into Adam Smith's campaign coffers. And I also just want to take a moment to thank our childcare volunteers today, Danielle, Alex, and Terrence. Kshama was just saying to me, she's not sure the last time she ever went to a Democratic Party town hall or big event, but she can't remember ever seeing childcare at any of those. And I think I went to one 5 years ago to protest something, and I also don't remember seeing childcare there. So yeah, we just really appreciate the folks who are donating their time to make these events accessible for parents. So next we'll go on to our open discussion. time. So if people have questions or contributions, comments, what are the issues or obstacles that you think are most important for us to discuss, or are going to be the kind of biggest obstacles to trying to actually organize strikes in our workplaces against ICE? Do you have any questions that you want Kshama to respond to at the end of the discussion? If you've been in the Seattle area for a long time, and I know there's at least a couple people here who have been, do you have any experiences from working on other campaigns or struggles through Kshama's council office? Any experiences or lessons that you could bring up to share with people who are newer to the area, because there's a lot of those people as well. Just some ideas. And yeah, you will need to come up to the microphone because we, again, have people watching on live stream and they won't be able to hear you. Even if in this room we can hear you from your seat, the folks on the live stream won't be able to hear. So if people just want to raise your hands, if you want to come into the discussion, and I'll, kind of point to you, and then you can just come on up and speak from the microphone. So yes, I think I saw 2 hands. Let's, and I think she's still busy. So yes, Patrick, if you want to come up, go ahead.
Thanks, everyone. This is a really exciting event. My name is Patrick. I'm a tech worker. I live in Seattle. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the role that people who work in tech can play in this campaign, and in the fight to end military funding for Israel, the fight to tax the rich to fund free healthcare, and to shut down ICE. When I, stand out on a street corner talking to people about this campaign, I get donations from Amazon employees all the time. We live in Seattle. And often they're like sort of sheepish about it. They're like kind of apologizing for even working for Amazon. And I think we're sort of sold this idea that like some poor sap slinging code in South Lake Union is the enemy in the same way that Jeff Bezos is the enemy. And that's not true. It's totally natural to hate the billionaire CEO of the company you work for, and a lot of people who work for Amazon do. And more tech workers, just like every other industry across the US, are recognizing we have nothing in common with the wealthy people who run our society. We win when they lose, and vice versa. And we've seen over the past few years, tech workers have started getting organized, using their power as workers more and more. In 2018, workers at Google they organized rolling walkouts all across the globe, from Seattle to Mumbai. They were demanding an end to the gender pay gap at Google. They were fighting for an end to forced arbitration for sexual harassment cases, which they actually won because of these walkouts. We've also seen companies where employees are fighting to have their company cut contracts with ICE and with the Israeli military. We've seen examples of that at Microsoft as well. That's actually been successful in getting Microsoft to cut some of those contracts. I think there's an important difference between those that we need to be aware of. At Microsoft, these have been much smaller, more individual actions. They've involved a lot more risk, frankly, for the individual people involved, versus the approach we saw at Google, where there was much more mass organizing. These were mass protests that were organized across the entire globe. And that's a really incredible example that we need to be following. Because these, the companies we work for, especially companies with a huge presence here in Seattle, Amazon, Google, Meta, these are all massive companies that make up huge swaths of the economy. Organizing at these companies is going to be key to rebuilding a fighting labor movement. But unfortunately, right now, that's not what we're seeing today from the leadership of the major labor unions. This is a labor leadership that's not taking on those ambitious organizing projects, and that refuses to fight the bosses and refuses to fight their political servants as well, and their political parties. And so that's one thing we want to do in Workers Strike Back, is we want to show how to use that fighting strategy, the fighting strategy that Kshama spoke about using in Seattle, how to use that across the country and use that at our workplaces and in the union movement as well. So in Seattle, Kshama led the Tax Amazon movement, which defeated Jeff Bezos and his political servants. And it was through this class struggle approach where we understand that our job isn't making deals with Democratic Party politicians. Our job isn't making really nice arguments. It's understanding that these capitalists are our enemy and building unrelenting pressure on them until they give us what we need. That's the approach that was taken with Tax Amazon. The Democratic Party politicians on the city council were forced to pass the Amazon tax. Corporate lobbyists got in their ear and they repealed it at their next meeting. And so the Tax Amazon movement went on the offensive and gathered tens of thousands of signatures during the height of the George Floyd uprising in order to force these politicians to pass the Amazon tax and actually pass an even bigger Amazon tax the second time that they passed it. And we're fighting to bring that approach to the labor movement. Joan spoke earlier, and as a Workers' Strike Back member, she fought for that class struggle approach during her tech union's most recent strike. And that's also why we need Kshama to be elected at the national level, because we need somebody who can force these labor leaders to take up the fight, to organize tech, force labor leaders to take up the fight, to unite tech workers, warehouse workers, other workers together in union struggle and in political struggle to shut down ICE. You know, Kshama said that the next time your union leader comes to you and says to write to your representatives, you should tell them to fuck off and organize a strike. Yeah. Kshama said that to us in this room. There's a few dozen of us here. We need to elect her at the national level so she can say that to tens of thousands of people at the same time. So I'll wrap up here. If you are a tech worker, we have a Tech Workers for Kshama event coming up on Sunday, March 29th. It's on Zoom at 2 Pacific time. So if you're on the live stream, you should go to kshamasawant.org and look at our events page and sign up for that event. If you're here in person and a tech worker, you should talk to me after because every working person is an important part of this fight. Solidarity.
Thank you, Patrick. I just want to encourage people when you're coming up here to, again, try to use this side corridor that we asked you to use to come to the bathroom, or you can possibly sneak through here. That might be a little iffy, but if we can avoid coming through this right here, that will protect our live stream from being suddenly disrupted. And then in case anyone needs to leave before the end of the discussion, I just want to urge everyone to fill one of these out. We have them on the campaign table right back there. I see a hand up. That's where they are. This is all of the upcoming volunteer events and public events for the campaign. Fill one of these out. Even if there's nothing listed here that works for you, there's a section at the bottom where you can put down your availability and we can contact you to figure out ways that you can get involved that work with your schedule. So make sure you do that. So yes, hands. Yes, go ahead, come on up. In the red shirt, yeah.
So I wanted to ask about the connection between the prison system and how it can correlate with the labor movement, because I know that at my school that I graduated from last year, UW, all of the furniture there is made by prison labor. A lot of companies like McDonald's, even Walmart also use prison labor. So I wanted to know, how can we also use inmate strikes as a way to also counter ICE, because I know that a lot of ICE detention facilities are also prisons as well.
Thank you for that excellent question. And I should remind people, if you want to introduce yourself briefly when you come up, please feel free to do that. Just your name. If you want to say anything else about where you work or go to school, organizations you're a part of. let me see, who would like to come up next? Yeah, come on up.
Can y'all hear me? I'll try to okay, here we go. My name's Mary. Hello, everyone. I'm a member of Workers Strike Back, and I'm also a volunteer for the Kshama Sawant for Congress campaign. Yeah, I came to Workers Strike Back out of many years of alienation, frustration, and rage towards my working life inside the machine of capitalism. I'm currently working as an activities coordinator in an assisted living facility, and I've been in the industry of continued care for almost 5 years now. And I know all too well that most working class and poor aged and disabled folks are utterly abandoned by our current healthcare and social systems. Recent studies have found shocking statistics for working and poor older people in this, the wealthiest nation in the history of humanity. Older adults in the lowest 60% wealth groups have been found to have a mortality rate almost twice that of the older people in the top 40% wealthiest groups. Over 19 million, or nearly half of older adults' households, do not have the income needed to cover basic living costs. A whopping 80% of them, or about 34 million households, are unable to weather a major financial blow such as widowhood, serious illness, or the need for long-term care. In other words, even after working to the bone for 40 and sometimes over 50 years of our lives, tens of millions of us are being left absolutely destitute at the end of it. Yeah, boo. Capitalism is an unbelievably brutal system for the vast majority of us, whether we're young or old, and regardless of which nation we live in. In the US, the fight to shut down ICE and to end the spending on imperialist war is linked with fighting to win free healthcare and affordable rent-controlled housing funded by taxing the rich, and with fighting to win a livable retirement for all. Yeah, let's hear it. So no organization other than Workers Strike Back is putting forward that fighting strategy we need to win any of these things. Concretely, such a fighting strategy means for working people to understand that both the Democratic and Republican parties represent the billionaires and multimillionaires, not us. A fighting strategy means having leaders who refuse to make any backdoor deals with the bosses or with the Democratic Party, and who relentlessly build mass movements to wrench victories from those bosses. Kshama Sawant is a rare leader who has such a track record, not only of never selling out workers, but of actually winning unheard of victories. Regardless if you're a union member or not, you can stand up for yourself and your needs as a worker, as well as the needs of your fellow workers, through joining Workers Strike Back. I encourage each and every one of you here today, or any of you listening on the live stream, to join Workers Strike Back and to join the fight to elect Kshama to Congress. Yeah. Because we need way more than these measly crumbs that are thrown our way through capitalism. At the same time, they're throwing these crumbs our way. They're also at the same time stealing trillions of dollars of wealth generated by billions of us workers, attacking our hard-won victories like Medicare and Medicaid, and spend hundreds of billions of dollars carrying out war and bloodshed. Workers have the power. Let's hear it. Workers have the power. Our labor is what makes society run. We can use that labor as leverage to bring this terrible machine of capitalism to a grinding halt to begin to improve our lives. We've been hearing about all the amazing victories that Kshama has achieved through her work in the Seattle City Council and continued through Workers Strike Back. Just imagine the impact we can make with Kshama in Congress. It would be unprecedented and absolutely earth-shattering. Let's fight to build a better world together, one free of greedy, bloodthirsty bosses. So I spend my free time helping Kshama's campaign because I believe that is time well spent. It's absolutely worth it for me to support my fellow workers, my family, and it's absolutely worth it for me personally. We have proof that when we fight, we win. That's right. Kshama winning a congressional seat in the 9th District is a real possibility, but we will need more support, more donations, and more volunteer hours to make it a reality. We need you, each and every one of you, to join in our fight. Let's send Kshama to Congress.
Thank you, Mary. Do we have anyone else who wants to come up? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name's Oscar. I'm a rank and file member of United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 3000. The purpose of a union is to bring workers together to build collective power that can then be used in a fight back against the bosses to win better conditions, higher wages, and to begin establishing a semblance of democracy in the workplace. Individually, we as workers are powerless against the bosses and their capitalist system. But when we get organized, carry out strike actions to withhold our labor, we can force victories out of the hands of the bosses. Carrying out this actual purpose of a union is called class struggle unionism. But to do any of these things effectively, you first of all need a democratic union, where rank and file members' voices are not only heard, but actively guide the direction of the union through collective decision. In other words, if the leadership of a union follows the strategy of class struggle unionism, they will automatically also build a union with strong rank and file democracy, precisely because there's no way for the leadership to fight and win against the bosses without bringing the mass of rank and file workers into the struggle. In my union, there's a blatant lack of democracy. One way this can be seen is through the leadership's tactics of undemocratically pushing contracts onto the rank and file membership. In our last contract fight and in previous ones, the leadership refused to build any real fight to win any much needed gains. Instead of organizing around strong and concrete demands related to wages, benefits, and working conditions, and preparing for strike action to win those demands, the union leadership opted to use vague slogans such as better stores and use strike action as an empty threat, making it clear to the grocery bosses that they had no intention of actually carrying out a strike. This meant that our union had very little leverage in the fight. In the end, the leadership decided to accept a contract with no significant gains, and when bringing it to the membership for a vote, they ensured that there wouldn't be a significant vote against it by not letting us read the contract until the day of voting and preventing any sort of democratic debate from being held, essentially using our vote as a rubber stamp. My union's leadership, just like the majority of labor leadership today, use undemocratic tactics like these in order to maintain friendly relationships with the bosses, directly at the expense of workers. This is business unionism. A lack of rank and file democracy goes hand in hand with business unionism. Business unionism by most of the American union leadership for many decades has had dire consequences for the living standards of tens of millions of workers. An example of this can be seen through a 2022 study by UFCW of our rank and file members. It was a survey of UFCW members who were workers at grocery stores owned by Kroger. It showed that nearly 15% of workers went homeless at some point, and that many missed rent and mortgage payments. It also showed that 25% of grocery workers went hungry because they couldn't afford groceries. Workers' conditions will continue to worsen until the labor unions begin to unambiguously fight for the working class. For that, we will need to overcome the obstacle of the current business unionist leadership. And that's where Workers Strike Back and Kshama's campaign come in. Because we're not going to be able to overcome the leadership that has failed us with just a few rank and file members here and there. We'll need to organize in a big way. Kshama's campaign is a powerful vehicle to bring union members and non-unionized workers together as a unified force. That is how Workers Strike Back members, who are also members of AFSCME, the largest public sector union, were able to overcome the opposition of their own union leadership to defeat Washington state Democrats last year and force them to reduce $7 billion of budget cuts down to only $2.7 billion. That's over a $4 billion reduction of budget cuts. If we can win this election and get Kshama in Congress, our fight back can bring hundreds of thousands of workers in nationally. Such a thing hasn't happened in many decades. That's what's possible, so we need to fight like hell to get Kshama elected. The lack of democracy in my own union can also be seen through the process of endorsing and funding political candidates. No democratic discussion is facilitated for the rank and file to engage in, and we don't even have the ability to vote on who our union endorses or whose election campaigns will be funded with our own dues. There is only a performative political committee which holds no decision-making power, and its input is often disregarded by the leadership. This leads to our union leadership endorsing and fundraising for many Democratic Party politicians. But this is no surprise. Business unionism means trying to make deals with the bosses, and being at peace with the bosses also means being in alliance with the political organizations of the bosses. In 2024, UFCW 3000 endorsed Kamala Harris, who unapologetically supported the genocide in Gaza and campaigned to quote unquote maintain a strong border, or in other words, carry out mass deportations. The Democratic Party, much like the Republican Party, has always represented the interests of the capitalist class. So when labor unions support their politicians, it is doing a great favor to the bosses. Instead, unions should be running and endorsing independent candidates just like Kshama Sawant in order to move towards building a mass working class party that will carry out national struggle to win historic victories. Kshama's campaign for Congress has the potential to make massive breakthroughs for the working class, and because of this, it is urgent we fight to get our unions to endorse Kshama's campaign. Kshama represents a genuine threat to the Democratic Party, so labor leadership will undoubtedly put up obstacles from us winning endorsements. To fight for UFCW 3000's endorsement of Kshama, I will petition my coworkers and find those who recognize the importance of this campaign. We will then make the magnitude of rank and file support for Kshama apparent and bring forward a resolution to endorse the campaign. This is a historic campaign to send a revolutionary socialist to Congress for the first time ever. So if you are a union member, I urge you to begin talking with your coworkers and fellow union members about the importance of this campaign. And I urge you to join me in petitioning your coworkers and fighting to push a resolution in your union to endorse Kshama Sawant. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Yeah, come on up.
Hey, everybody. Can everyone hear me? I did not prepare these remarks. This is a personal reflection, but it's an important one. Other day, I saw a movie. It was called Send Help. It was by the same people who made Evil Dead. And in the first, and this is not a commercial for that movie, by the way. First act of that movie is about a woman named Linda. She's really smart. She's smarter than her bosses. She creates value for her bosses. She's waiting to become a vice president. And every time Linda has an opportunity to be seen, her work is taken. And it is slid over to a McKinsey guy. And the McKinsey guy, who can barely even read the stuff she came up with, walks into that meeting and takes credit. What I have been told all of you is that I'm not a unionized worker. I worked for Google for 9 years of my life. And then I worked for Amazon for close to 6. And then did other tech BS for another year or so. And in that first 3 years, my reaction to being a person of color, to being someone who's not from like a really high class background, and to being smarter than my bosses in those first 3 years was not to say, screw this, I'm walking away. But it was to say, to hell with these people. I'm going to get their power and I'm going to beat them on their own terms. I'm going to be a very important person. And so I worked and I joined a group called Special Projects. Companies have these, they used to, where they pour millions of dollars into these really ambitious ideas and they pull the people who they think are the smartest people in the company and they put them all together and say, you're the special people and you're here to save the world. And I worked in that world for more than a decade. And I saw millions of dollars fed to projects that were designed to do things like, let's cure disease, or let's make it easier for people to have connection, or let's make it easier to receive healthcare. Millions of dollars. Do you know how much all of those projects actually accomplished? Fucking zero. That's how much. Do you know how much money was spent? More than I can even calculate. And I, after a while, began feeling like, what is wrong? I'm an important person. I go to conferences and I give talks and people applaud, right? I write articles and stuff. Why do I feel so empty? Why do I feel like everybody I work for doesn't give a shit about me, but about what I can do? And not just what I can do, but what I can do for them or for their Epstein class friend who's going to borrow that technology. I could tell you a million stories of the things I've seen, and I will. But the one story I want to tell you is this, that at a certain point in my life, this wasn't enough emotionally. I had spent my whole life chasing A's in school and awards, and I thought that this was the reward. You get to be in charge. And I felt like shit the whole time. I felt like shit because I walked around the world with blinders. Like I'd step off of a first-class flight and see people begging for change and think to myself, when I'm in charge, it's not going to be like this. I'm not in charge. I've been working at this for 16 years, and people like me, we will never be in charge. And all these wonderful things that we're supposed to do, those things never actually happen. And then the other day, I was putting up flyers. It was Friday along 3rd Avenue. And I came the next day to do some more volunteering, and someone had torn them down. They had torn them down, and I was pissed. And then I just got my flyers, and I put them back up. And I did it another day. And here's what I realized. That action wasn't futile. In fact, in terms of how I felt in my heart, it was the first time in my entire life that I felt I actually did something for the problems that I went to school and went to work for. It was the first time I actually did something significant with myself. And what we have here is community. And what I never had in Silicon Valley, not once, was actual community. We have this. And if there's nothing we can get from Silicon Valley, then my message to all of you out there is that there's nothing there for you to gain, which means there's nothing left for you to lose. I'm here to fight. I'm a dad from Georgetown. That's what I'm proud of being. I'm a member of Workers Strike Back. That's what I'm proud of being. And I'm inviting all of you to join us. Thank you. Yeah.
leadership and about a fighting strategy. Others on the left will talk about leadership, but they mean something different. What made Kshama's city council office and the movements we led and make Workers Strike Back so fundamentally different is the type of movements that we're talking about are us going to war against the political establishment and the ruling class. It's not us trying to convince them to do the right thing. It is not us trying to say, how far can we go to get your support and what is too far to go. It is us trying to make their lives hell in every way possible to make them concede on the things that we're fighting for. That's what this is about. And that's not because we're mean. That's because we're fighting for the interests of working class people, for the immense majority of society, and they are fighting against those interests. The ruling class, the billionaires, they don't care anything about us. And the Democratic Party and the Republican Party represent them. And so if we're going to win anything under this system, it is going to be because we out-organize the ruling class. And we have tremendous ability to do that because there are billions of us and there are really only a few hundred of them. The only reason they are able to continue to dominate society is because the working class is disorganized. What Kshama did for a decade on the city council is that she relentlessly organized working class people to put pressure in every possible way against that political establishment. And it had tremendous results, despite the fact that she was the only elected official, despite the fact that all of these Democrats did everything in their power to try to block that, despite the fact that the NGO leaders and the labor leaders did everything they could to try to block that. I think it shows how incredibly powerful class struggle is, that one elected socialist and relatively small movements, I'm going to be honest, relatively small movements were able to win historic gains year after year after year. And there's nothing I think that horrifies the ruling class more right now than the idea that Kshama could actually be elected to U.S. Congress, and instead of building movements on a city level, building them on a national level with international impacts. So we have the power to make that happen, but in order for that to happen, we have to build a much stronger movement. We have to have thousands of people active in this fight, in parallel campaigning around District 9. That's what's going to be necessary. And in that, we have to be prepared, as Kshama did, to stand up against the misleadership, whether it's coming from the labor leaders, where it's coming from progressive Democrats, whoever it's coming from that's trying to tell us no, because that's what they do. The gatekeepers, their answer is no. Whatever it is you're fighting for, whatever it is the working class needs, their answer is no. Well, they can go straight to fucking hell, because we are going to build the strongest possible movement that we can to actually win transformative change by electing the first ever revolutionary socialist to U.S. Congress. And we can make that happen, but we just need to do what we're doing right now on a much larger scale. And we need to do it with the clarity that we're not going to let them stand in the way between us and overturning this rotten fucking system.
Sorry, it always takes me a second to the mic. Hello, my name's Natalie. I'm a member of Workers Strike Back and have been an organizer that's worked in the movements that Kshama's been a part of for many years. And I want to say, just from a personal standpoint and a more personal kind of building of what Calvin's saying, tabling today out in the pouring rain was amazing. And I love tabling. I love talking to working people about what our politics are and what we stand for. And very often, most of the conversations are wonderful. Very rarely do I get this one question, and I think it is kind of central to what we're talking about and why Kshama needs to win this congressional seat is, I love her politics, but I really don't like the way that she does them and her attitude and her actions. They're too much. They're too aggressive. And usually at the table, I kind of try to smoothly or gently say, well, aren't you angry? And in this moment, I'd like to say it much more sharply. Aren't you fucking angry? Yeah! Aren't you goddamn terrified and angry at the fucking horrifying state that we live in, where ICE is snatching people off the streets, that we're helping fund a genocide in Gaza, that we are now actively in a fucking military engagement with Iran that we pretend isn't in a war, but absolutely is a fucking war. Aren't you fucking angry right now? And that is what this congressional campaign is about. It is about channeling that anger and channeling that fury into a weapon against the ruling class that can actually command them to bend to our will. And that is something that we have seen here, that, like Calvin said, really small movements in the grand scheme of things, really one seat in the grand scheme of things, have made movements that have changed the national conversation. That all of the kind of like airy, kind of points that Democrats make about how I don't really like this, I don't really appreciate that we didn't get asked if we wanted to vote for a war. That is a way to bury movements and get rid of opposition and be a vent for anger. But real revolutionary socialist ideas will change things, because as we've seen here, someone who really fucking means it can change the way that the nation talks about the minimum wage, about healthcare, about just about anything. And that's what we need to do, is to channel this working class fury into a weapon through the vehicle of this congressional campaign. And I'm so happy to be a part of it and so excited to build it. And thank you for listening to me. Solidarity.
Thank you, Natalie. So I think we have time for maybe one more, and yes, saw your hand up here. Go ahead.
So I have more questions than I do statements. I'll say I believe the most radical, meaningful thing we can do is to know our neighbors. The mutual aid that we talk about on the direct action remains an abstract idea until we are on a first name basis with those around us. We know when they need help and are ready to give it, and we're ready to ask for the help. And that's something that people get caught up on a lot. They have too much pride to ask for help. But if you refuse to ask for help, then you're kept back from doing the work that people need you to be doing. So to ask for help is not just a nice thing, it's an obligation as someone that's trying to care for their fellow man. Yeah, and I'd like to know where we're at in organizing against ICE expansion in Tukwila, the Sabi Corporation, and I'd like to know where are we at in organizing rapid response groups to protect immigrants in our communities.
strike. That is what threatened Trump and forced him to at least make a statement saying, oh my, we might need to start withdrawing those troops from the city. So that is the kind of political organizing, mass organizing that we're going to need. And that is, and I really appreciate Patrick talking about the difference between having individuals or small groups of individuals go up against something like ICE terror versus mass organizing, like mass protests, mass civil disobedience, the way we shut down SeaTac Airport in 2017, and mass strike actions. That is what scares the ruling class. And that doesn't mean we don't appreciate the absolutely incalculable courage that is shown by every single individual who has stood up for ICE, stood up against ICE. Renee Good, Alex Pretti, so many activists who have either been murdered like them in broad daylight or have faced arrests, have been fired from their jobs, have faced all kinds of consequences. All the student and worker activists who have been fighting back against the genocide in Gaza since 2023 and have faced, like the students and workers at Columbia University and at various colleges in New York, they have faced actual personal repercussions. So this is not a questioning of their courage, because it is incalculable courage that takes to carry out that action. Same with the No Azure for Apartheid, Microsoft workers, tech workers who have faced firings. Many of them have been fired. As Patrick said, this is incredibly dangerous. So we celebrate that courage, but it is also our obligation, precisely because we want to protect workers who are against this type of retaliation, that the best way actually is not for a few individuals to show courage by ourselves, but to channel that courage and anger, as Natalie said, into mass organizing, especially shutting down the economic machine of capitalism. Nothing will give pause to Trump's ICE as a strike action would. Absolutely not.
Are we stopping?
And that is, sorry?
Are we stopping saving for
Stopping what?
the new ICE office? They say
Yeah, I don't have a separate answer for that. Honestly, this is what will stop that. All the questions that we are asking about, how can we shut down ICE? How can we shut down detention centers? How can we stop the deportations? How can we stop the genocide in Gaza? How can we stop, how can we address the cost of living crisis that we're facing, which is absolutely crushing us? We're barely able to pay for rent, food, healthcare, and the needs of children and elderly family members. We're living in very, very dire straits. I really echo Natalie's question. Aren't you angry? I mean, we are angry and we need to fight back and we need a strategy. And I would be lying. I would be lying to you and I would be selling out if I were to say that organizing some small thing here and there is going to change these things and stop the ICE office. The only way to shut down that ICE office is to do exactly what we're doing, which is mass organizing, but not just mass organizing, just having millions of people come out, which No Kings has done, but mass organizing on the basis of an actual strategy, as Calvin was saying, to put a real fear in the Trump administration. But you know what? Putting real fear in the Trump administration means putting real fear in both the Democratic and Republican parties. Those two things go together. That's right. You can't put real fear in Trump without also scaring the Democrats, because they both uphold the same system. And that is the main obstacle we are facing, because the vast majority, and I'm being nice by saying vast majority, it's really almost all of them, labor leaders and NGO leaders are refusing to cross that line. And that is why they will talk about Trump endlessly, but they will not cross the line where they join the dots and say, actually, this is systemic, and Trump is able to do it only because the Democratic Party allows him to do this.
That's right.
You think Trump would be able to carry out Operation Metro Surge if the Democrats in Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota had actually fought against him? He would not be able to do that. If the Democrats and the labor leadership in Minneapolis and Minnesota had decided, we are not going to allow this to become ICE country, and that we are going to carry out a general strike, we're going to shut down the state, we're going to shut down Target, IBM, and every single Mayo Clinic, all the big corporations in Minneapolis and Minnesota that are hand in glove with the Trump administration, if they had decided to shut down all of that, that would have immediately sent a message to the U.S. capitalist class as a whole that we are not going to get away with this. And if we don't, and their own, the sober ones among them, they themselves would have had a discussion and said, hey, you need to fucking back off because we don't want this general strike spreading from Minnesota to other states. That is what the message would have been. The problem is that we cannot simply talk about strike action, general strike in the abstract. The problem we are facing, and this is a historic problem, not just in the United States, but internationally, the problem is there is no leadership outside of Worker Strike Back and our campaign to actually do these things. People some people, some naysayers have started asking me, oh, why do you think the solution to every problem is your congressional campaign? Last time we did a town hall, that was a question we got asked on live stream. Which problem do you not connect with your congressional campaign? The answer to that is a simple, there is no problem that we don't connect to the congressional campaign, because the problems we face in our society are all problems generated by this evil and brutal capitalist system. And the only way that we can actually solve those problems is through the strategy that we used in Seattle, and that is the strategy that we're using in this congressional campaign and we're using in Worker Strike Back. It gives me no pleasure. It gives me no pleasure to have to admit that no other leadership is being provided. That is tragic for the working class. We don't want intellectual property on these ideas. We didn't invent these ideas. These ideas are ideas of the Russian Revolution, of the Bolsheviks who fought against not only the Tsar, the monarchy, but against the capitalist system as a whole. They fought against the might of capitalism internationally, and they defended the workers' revolution there. That is the kind of idea that we are using. That is the kind of strategy that we used in Seattle and we are using here. That is also the strategy that was used by workers who actually brought forward the general strikes in the 1930s and were able to win the victories that we have won. I mean, Joan mentioned the 40-hour work week. I mean, that was a hard-won victory that was a product of the general strikes of the 1930s. And those general strikes actually also led to mass unionization of women, immigrant workers, and Black workers. It was the formation of what was called the CIO, Congress of Industrial Organizations, that led to this historic wave of unionization, because the business unionist leaders in the American Federation of Labor had held, they were gatekeepers, and they were preventing Black workers, women workers, and immigrant workers from joining the union, because that is the way in which the business unionist leaders help the bosses divide workers and keep everybody's wages at rock bottom. If we want our wages to go up, we have to fight for everybody's wages to go up. That is how it works under capitalism. And so we have no choice but to unite across race, nationality, ethnicity, gender, and all the other things that divide us. But the reason we are building this campaign, and the reason we are unabashedly and unapologetically declaring that this is the campaign that nationally American working class people should join, is not because we are full of ourselves, or because we are arrogant, or because we don't like to praise others, which is, these are all accusations I've heard, but it's because we are being deadly honest and sober with the working class and explaining that this is the only strategy that wins. We wish there were other candidates for Congress this year who were using our strategy, and that we could have a whole slate of candidates putting forward the same kind of strategy and similar demands and fighting together. We don't have that. So we've got to do the most of what we have. We've got to do the most from what we have, and this is what we have. We have this historic campaign, and it is based on a proven strategy. So rather than get bogged down in these questions about why others are not doing it, or why, all the naysayers against us, we should understand that this strategy actually succeeds and it is going to energize people. I mean, I really agree with what Natalie said. When we go out and talk to working people, we don't get working people being the naysayers. Who are the naysayers? It is the political operatives. When Natalie was speaking, I remembered, it reminded me of something, and I've pulled it up because I wanted to share a quote. In 2019, when we ran for our second re-election for the city council, the Democratic Party ran a slew of candidates against me. And they all had the same message. Kshama, she's not nice. I agree with her, but she's not nice. This is what they said. And this is an article in the Stranger newspaper by Teresa Mosqueda and Lorena Gonzalez, who were proudly holding up the banner of progressive Democrats, and they were the Labor Democrats and Progressive Democrats. I know them. They were on the city council with me. They ran one of the most high-profile candidates against me. I mean, they publicly declared they were running a candidate against me. And in the Stranger newspaper, Lorena Gonzalez said, "I think I agree a lot with many of her policies," meaning my policies. "But unfortunately, I have found that there is almost a non-existing working relationship between her and myself, and frankly, anyone else on the floor." She's referring to the second floor where all the city council offices are. She described me as divisive, and both Gonzalez and Mosqueda said they were like, we need different tactics in different situations. It is not about style, but it is a question of how, whether it is you're working collaboratively with other people on the council. This is what it comes down to. When they say you're not collaborating with other Democrats, what they're really saying, which they will never say to you because they will be exposed, is she's not willing, and she's never willing to sell out. She's never willing to sell out. That is their complaint. What? It is a badge of honor for me that they have this perennial complaint that I don't sell out, because I don't ever want to sell out. Yeah. And I think this is the hardest thing for people to understand, because it is the most invisible thing. There are many leaders, and it's not just about city council and Congress. You have labor leaders, you have unelected leaders, like in movements like Black Lives Matter, many other such movements, the women's movement. When Roe v. Wade was under attack, there were many protests, there were many leaders, women's leaders, women's organizations. The problem is that no matter what your intentions are and how good your intentions might be, if you are not willing to do what we have done, you are going to sell out, because they are going to pose it as, if you fight unambiguously for the working class, then somehow you don't have good relations with us. That is the role of gatekeepers, to forever accuse you of not having good relations with them. The problem is that if you have quote unquote good relations with them, it means selling out workers. The two things cannot be disentangled. And that is why it is so hard to find leadership like ours. It is not impossible, because in the past, we have seen leaders like this, but at this moment, concretely, nobody else is providing. That is why we are building this campaign, because we know there are ordinary working people and rank and file union members out there who want to fight like we do, and they need to join us. That is the only way we can build this. And that is why, if you can see, our focus is never on trying to attract this or that leader of this or that organization. The reason we have tables, and you see our tables all across Congressional District 9, is because we want to talk to ordinary working people. That is our focus, because that is where we know the fight will come from. The fight will not come from the leaders. And just last 2 points, the very important question about the prison system and the labor movement. I think it is important for us to talk about all these sections of our society that are being exploited and that are being damaged, just like us regular people. And workers in the jails, prisons, and the ICE detention centers are part of what we are doing. They're part of the working class. Just like, as Mary said, the elderly, people who are not technically going to work today, but were part of the working class, they are also part of the working class. And as Patrick said, tech workers who may be making 6-figure salaries, they are also part of the working class. We have to understand the difference between who is workers and who our allies are, which is everybody who's a worker, as opposed to the billionaire. And so, yes, there is something called the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee that is unionizing thousands of inmates. But under the current law, these unions don't get recognized legally as unions. Okay, so that is a real issue. But I'm not proposing that we start fighting to legalize those unions. Instead, I think what we need to do is to build the union movement overall. Because if we can have some major victories in the union movement, that will provide impetus for everything, including unionizing Black workers, unionizing inmates in jails and detention centers, and unionizing women. That is why, as I said, I don't have a separate answer for each thing. All of these things are connected, and the only way to actually do this is to rebuild militancy in the labor movement. I'll tell you in one sentence. If somebody asked me, tell me in one sentence, what is the breakthrough we need in the union movement to shift, change history? It will be to unionize Amazon. That alone will be a complete unionizing Amazon will be an earth-shattering, history-changing development. But in order to make that happen, we will need first to have a militant uprising in the rank and file that can sweep aside the leadership that is incapable of fighting Amazon. We could have a whole meeting just on unionizing Amazon, and we don't have the time. But just to give one sort of facet of why this is so difficult, is there have been attempts to unionize Amazon in different warehouses. That's where it started, in the warehouses. Workers want to unionize. They are desperately fighting to unionize. They face horrible conditions. We heard about how a woman actually lost her babies. She was carrying twins. I'm not able to get over the story. She was carrying twins and she lost her babies because she had a miscarriage because of the horrendous working conditions that Amazon is subjecting her to. Can you imagine? Workers want to fight back. But what has happened in all these unionizing efforts is that the business unionist labor leadership simply does not have the ability or the willingness to do what it takes to go up against the vicious union-busting bosses of Amazon. And it's not only Jeff Bezos, the entire billionaire class internationally is invested in preventing unionizing at Amazon because they know, as should we. My God, can you imagine unionizing Amazon? It will completely embolden the international working class, and it will, has the potential to become an unstoppable force. There is no way any billionaire or multimillionaire wants a union at Amazon because they know what it will mean. So in order to go up against that, you will need union leadership that is capable of organizing a fighting movement in multiple warehouses at the same time and carry out strike actions and work stoppages at those multiple warehouses. The reason I'm saying that is because when there is a union movement that is somewhat close to success, they just shut down the warehouse. Or they will use other methods to kill the union movement in that warehouse. So that is why we need a complete shift away from the union movement that we have today. And that's not going to come from me speaking about it or from us having meetings. It has a real potential to come if we win a victory like electing a revolutionary socialist to the US Congress, because that will bring millions of workers. If we get elected, it will get millions of workers across America to look up and take notice, and they will come to our rallies because we will carry out rallies across the nation. They will come to our rallies, and unlike AOC and Bernie Sanders, I'm not going to be holding these rallies and tell them vote blue. I'm going to say, let's unionize, let's fight back, let's carry out strike actions. Yeah. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Neil for the thoughts he shared about how the real liberation, concretely from a strategy standpoint, but also from the standpoint of how you feel about your life and whether your time is being used in a fruitful manner, it also, that how you feel is very much linked with the actual effectiveness of the strategy. And he made a very important point, which is that our liberation is not going to come from, it's not going to come from, sort of doing feel-good things at the workplace or working at an NGO or, what is that whole thing Microsoft has, Microsoft Give campaign or whatever, where Microsoft matches your donation during Christmas time. That's not going to change society. That actually just allows the companies to, whitewash all their evil. The real community, and I really appreciate Neil using the word community, the real community comes when we actually have a strategy to fight back. And this is a proven strategy. This is a community. It is a community of workers who are fighting back. And there is no better antidote to isolation, depression, and doom scrolling than fighting for this congressional campaign. So I hope you all join us. Solidarity.
What is the concrete action we can take this week to build towards the general strike against Washington?
Yes. We have someone who arrived recently. Was an activist who worked with Kshama's council office to pass the first ever ban on caste discrimination outside of South Asia. And so, yeah,
Good afternoon. Does it look like? Can you hear me? That's good. I'm loud enough. I think you can hear me. So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was supposed to be here early, but I got stuck somewhere. My name is Hira Singh. I'm a resident of Kent here. So unfortunately, I don't live in our district where she's gonna be, but I have enough people to bring in that side. So I'm gonna have very few words. So the one thing is very important, is noticeable, is when you're doing something and make people upset, the wrong people upset, when Trump calls your name, that means you're doing something right. That is Sister Kshama. Whenever she does something, she brought the casteism bill, the Modi was upset. He was right or wrong. So we have, like, I've been to different rallies. I'm sorry, I have not my speech prepared, but I am really upset with all the shutdown ice part. We've seen is the recent, the Christine, the House listener, the whatever she was doing there, and all kind of looting they're doing there, and the killing people in Minnesota, literally being an immigrant person, that's not acceptable. And what is our congressman doing? The people dying in Gaza, people dying in Iran, the whole world is right now, as people are brutally killed. Who is taking care of those people? What is Congressman Adam Smith doing? Nothing. We need a people who can understand a common man's feeling, what are the problems are there. So that's why we need to support our sister Kshama, because we need her in Congress. That's why we need your voice. We need all these. Because I'm just a Democrat, sorry, but I don't want to go any party, but we need a people who can raise a common people's voice. That's very important. So I'm from Sikh religion. So we have basically three pillars of the religion. Very three pillars. Three pillars is, the first one is Kirtan Karna, means hard work. To pray to God is second one, and third one is most important, is sharing. everything you have to share. And that's what the principle, that's what we are following here. That we're talking about unionization, we're talking about the healthcare for everyone. All those things is part of the sharing. And that's part of my belief. And we have to do this. There's all the boundaries, and I don't believe in the borders and all those. We're all humans. We should take care of humanity first. And that's what our sister Kshama is doing it. I always thankful her for bringing the casteism bill, because that was most important for the people of India, especially. I don't know, because I grew up there. I've seen it, how people are negatively treated there by your last name. And that's not acceptable. So sorry, I won't take more time. Thank you everyone for coming here, but thank you, sister, to having me time here. Please support everyone who's listening. Please support Sister Kshama. You can give her money, you can walk with her, you can do sign waving, door knocking, anything, any way you can help, please help. Thank you very much.
So thank you everyone for coming today, for staying this long. Volunteer sign-up sheets. Make sure you fill one of these out and turn it in to a campaign volunteer before you leave. We have our next big volunteer event coming up is, which side of, here we go. We have a Spring Volunteer Day on Sunday, March 22nd at the Othello Playground at 11 a.m. So it's going to be a Sunday morning. We're going to have all of the people working on the campaign, all of the volunteers, people who've come to events like this in all different parts of the district. We're all going to come together. We're going to do some quick trainings on how to most effectively talk to people at the doors. And then we'll go out and, in teams of 2 with more experienced people together with less experienced people. And we'll go door knock, we'll set up tables, and we'll talk to people about this campaign. So if you haven't done any volunteering for the campaign yet, I really encourage you to come out to that Spring Volunteer Day. And then we also have our next Worker Strike Back monthly meeting. Worker Strike Back is the organization that Kshama helped found when she left the Seattle City Council. We have monthly meetings both here in Seattle and on Zoom. We have national monthly meetings. And the topic of our next meeting is No War on Iran. And that is Wednesday, March 18th at the New Hope Ministry Baptist Church in Seattle. So that's this side of the green flyer, the opposite side of the Volunteer Day flyer. So make sure you take this with you on your way out. And then our next town hall, like this event, the topic is going to be taxing the rich to massively expand social housing. And that's going to be on Sunday, April 4th at the Ethiopian Community Center. And so make sure you take these leaflets with you. Make sure you fill out the volunteer form. If you're watching the live stream, you can go to kshamasawant.org/volunteer to sign up for upcoming volunteer events. And yes, thank you again, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you again.